Just mark it all as cleared. These hazmat checks are slowing us down. My name's Wesley Hart. I'm 46 years old, been driving trucks for 23 years, and I've never had a single Department of Transportation violation. Not one. That's something you don't throw away lightly in this business. I stared at the clipboard Colin Reddick handed me. 3 tankers loaded with Class 8 corrosives sat in the yard behind us, and every one of them had overdue maintenance. The lead truck's wheel seals were weeping hydraulic fluid. The second had a compressor that wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, and the third needed new brake pads 2 weeks ago. Colin was new to Trail Point hauling services, transferred in from some desk job in Phoenix about 4 months back, all shiny shoes and management theories. He didn't know the difference between a glad hand and a kingpin, but he sure knew how to read a profit margin. That tanker's carrying sulfuric acid, I said, pointing to the lead truck. You want me to sign off on seals that are already leaking? He looked at me like I'd asked him to explain quantum physics. Wesley, I need these rigs rolling by 6 a.m. The client's breathing down my neck about delivery times. I'd heard this song before. New supervisors always came in swinging, trying to prove they could squeeze more miles out of less time. Most of them learned the hard way that shortcuts in hazmat transport don't save money. They cost licenses. The seals fail on the highway, and that acid eats through the tank liner. Then what? Then we'll deal with it, Colin said, checking his phone. Right now I need you to be a team player. Team player. That's what they always said when they wanted you to do something stupid. I looked at the clipboard again. Pre-trip inspection forms, all blank. Brake system checks, tire pressure logs, fluid level reports, everything that stood between a safe delivery and a catastrophic spill. Colin wanted me to forge federal documents so he could hit his numbers. The thing is, I'd been watching this pattern for months. Ever since Colin took over, maintenance requests disappeared into his desk drawer. Drivers complained about handling problems, steering issues, brake fade. All of it got rubber stamped as resolved, without a wrench ever touching metal. I handed the clipboard back to him. I'm not signing falsified records. Colin's expression shifted. The fake friendliness dropped away, and I saw exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. You're too cautious for logistics, Wesley. Efficient drivers know when to skip inspections. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end well for somebody. Question was, who? I'd started driving when my dad got too sick to work his own rig. That was back in 2001, when trucking still meant something. You took care of your equipment, followed the rules, and built a reputation that opened doors. My dad taught me that a driver's only as good as his safety record, and mine was spotless. 23 years of clean logbooks, 0 accidents, 0 violations, 0 compromises. When Trail Point hired me 3 years ago, it was because their insurance company demanded experienced hazmat drivers. The pay was decent, the routes were steady, and the old supervisor, Frank Morrison, ran a tight operation. Frank understood that moving dangerous chemicals wasn't about speed, it was about precision. Then Frank retired, and they brought in Colin. The changes started small. Maintenance schedules got optimized, inspection checklists became streamlined. Drivers who asked too many questions about equipment problems found their routes reassigned to younger guys who kept their mouths shut. I watched it happen to Danny Flores first. 20-year veteran, spotless record, but he made the mistake of refusing to drive a truck with a cracked exhaust manifold. Colin wrote him up for insubordination and transferred him to short-haul freight runs that paid half what hazmat work brought in. Then it was Kevin Walsh. He caught Colin's attention by documenting brake problems that weren't getting fixed. Suddenly, Kevin's performance reviews mentioned attitude issues and resistance to operational efficiency. The pattern was clear. Colin was weeding out drivers who cared more about safety than speed. My wife Angela noticed the change in me before I did. I'd come home quiet, picking at dinner, checking my phone for work messages that used to wait until morning. "You're worried about something," she said one night while we cleaned dishes. "New boss is cutting corners." She dried a plate slowly, thinking. "The kind of corners that get people hurt. The kind that get people killed." Angela had been married to a trucker long enough to know what that meant. Hazmat wasn't like hauling furniture or groceries. When things went wrong with chemicals, they went wrong fast and bad. What are you going to do? That was the question I'd been avoiding for weeks. I could keep my head down, follow orders, and hope nothing terrible happened on my watch. Or I could stand my ground and probably lose my job. But there was a third option I'd been considering, something my dad taught me about protecting yourself in a business where one mistake could end everything. I'm going to start keeping better records, I told her. Angela understood. She squeezed my shoulder and didn't ask any more questions. That night, I started photographing everything. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in November. I arrived at the depot to find 3 tankers staged for departure, all carrying Class 8 corrosives bound for industrial sites in Wyoming. Standard run, good money. But when I did my pre-trip inspection, I found problems that should have grounded all 3 rigs. The lead truck had hydraulic fluid weeping from both rear wheel seals. Not dripping, weeping in steady streams that left dark stains on the pavement. The second truck's air compressor was cycling every 30 seconds, which meant either a massive leak or failing pressure regulation. The third truck's brake pads were worn down to metal, grinding against the rotors every time someone moved it in the yard. I documented everything with my phone camera, then filled out formal maintenance requests for each truck. Colin was in his office when I knocked on the door. "We've got problems with the Wyoming run," I said, setting the paperwork on his desk. He barely looked at it. "What kind of problems?" "Wheel seals, air system, and brakes. These trucks shouldn't leave the yard." Colin leaned back in his chair, studying me with the kind of expression you see on a man who's already made his decision. "Wesley, I'm going to be straight with you. This company needs drivers who understand the business, drivers who can solve problems instead of creating them. Preventing a hazmat spill isn't creating problems. Losing a major client because we can't deliver on time is." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out 3 pre-trip inspection forms, already filled out, already signed, all marked as satisfactory. "These trucks passed inspection yesterday," he said. "Must have been a different set of eyes looking at them." I stared at the forged documents. Danny Flores' signature on one, Kevin Walsh's on another, and a signature I didn't recognize on the third. All fake. "You want me to drive trucks with falsified safety records? I want you to do your job." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about one bad decision or corner cutting to meet a deadline. Colin had been systematically falsifying federal documents for months, putting drivers at risk and exposing the company to massive liability, and now he was asking me to become part of it. I looked at those forged inspection forms and saw exactly where this was heading. Sooner or later, one of those trucks was going to fail catastrophically. When it did, the Department of Transportation would investigate, and they'd find a trail of falsified records leading straight back to whoever signed them. Colin was setting up his drivers to take the fall. I stood up, pulled my keys from my pocket, and set them on his desk next to the paperwork. "I'm not signing falsified records." "Then you're not driving for Trail Point." I walked out without another word. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. 3 days after I quit, Colin called my house. "Wesley, I think we had a misunderstanding," he said, his voice different now, friendlier. "Why don't you come in tomorrow morning? We can work something out." Angela was folding laundry in the living room, but I could tell she was listening. "What kind of something?" "Look, maybe I came on too strong about those inspections. You've got experience I can't replace overnight. How about we compromise?" Compromise. That was a word that had gotten a lot of good drivers in trouble over the years. What kind of compromise? "You handle the pre-trip inspections your way and I'll handle the scheduling my way. We both get what we need." It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Colin hadn't struck me as the type to back down from a fight, especially after firing me 3 days earlier. "I'll think about it," I said. "Don't think too long. I've got applications from younger drivers who might be more flexible." The threat was subtle, but clear. Take the deal, or someone else would take my roots. I met Colin the next morning in his office. He had coffee waiting and my old schedule printed out ready to go. But when he handed me the clipboard, I saw the same pattern as before. Pre-trip inspection forms with maintenance issues already marked as resolved. These trucks still haven't been fixed, I said. They passed inspection yesterday. By who? Colin's smile faded slightly. By me. I'm certified to conduct safety inspections. That was news to me. I'd never seen Colin so much as check tire pressure, let alone perform a comprehensive DOT inspection. Since when? Since it became necessary. I looked at the paperwork more carefully. Colin's signature was on every form, dated the day after I quit. Either he'd developed supernatural mechanical skills overnight, or he was doubling down on document fraud. These trucks need real maintenance, not paperwork fixes. Wesley, you're not hearing me. The trucks are fine. The inspections are complete. Your job is to drive them safely to their destinations. He was trapped in his own lie now. If he admitted the trucks needed work, he'd have to explain why he'd signed off on them. If he stuck to the story, he'd be asking me to drive equipment I knew was dangerous. I want to see the maintenance logs. That's not your department anymore. It is, if you want me to drive. Colin opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder, maintenance records for the entire fleet dating back 6 months. I flipped through them quickly, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Dozens of work orders marked completed with no corresponding parts receipts. Brake replacements with no record of brake pad purchases. Transmission services with no fluid change documentation. It wasn't just corner cutting, it was systematic fraud. These records are fake, I said. These records are accurate. Where are the parts receipts? Electronic billing, everything's digital now. I closed the folder and looked at Colin carefully. He was sweating slightly despite the cool morning air. I need to see the digital records. Wesley, I'm trying to work with you here, but you're making this very difficult. Are you going to drive these routes or not? The question hung in the air between us. I could take the deal, keep my mouth shut, and hope nothing went wrong. Or I could walk away and let someone else deal with the consequences. But there was a third option. I'll drive them, I said. Colin's relief was visible. Good. I knew we could work this out. But I'll be doing my own inspections. Real ones. Fine. Whatever makes you comfortable. I left his office with my roots and my clipboard, but I also left with something else. Confirmation that Colin was running a systematic fraud operation, and now I had documentary evidence. What Colin didn't know was that I'd been building a case against him for months. That afternoon, I drove out to Morrison's Auto and Truck Repair, where Frank Morrison had taken a part-time job after retiring from Trail Point. Frank had been supervising hazmat operations for 15 years before Colin arrived, and he knew every truck in our fleet better than their own drivers. Wesley, Frank said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Heard you had some words with the new boss. More than words. Frank, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. He led me to his office, a cramped space that smelled like coffee and motor oil. What's on your mind? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd been taking for months. Maintenance requests marked completed with no actual work done. Inspection reports signed by drivers who'd never seen the trucks. Safety violations documented and ignored. Frank studied each image carefully, his expression growing darker. Jesus, Wesley, how long has this been going on? Since about a month after Colin took over, but it's getting worse. You report this to DOT yet? That's what I want to ask you about. If I file a whistleblower complaint, what happens? Frank leaned back in his chair thinking. Department of Transportation takes falsified hazmat records very seriously. They'll investigate, probably do surprise inspections, review everything going back 2 years. If they find systematic fraud, what kind of penalties? For the company, fines, license suspension, possible criminal charges. For whoever signed the fake documents, personal liability, potential jail time, lifetime ban from commercial driving. That was what I'd been afraid of. Colin wasn't just risking the company, he was setting up his drivers to take criminal responsibility for his decisions. There's something else, Frank said. "I've been hearing things around town. Other companies talking about Trail Point's delivery times, how they're suddenly beating everyone's schedules." "What kind of things?" "The kind that make people wonder how they're moving hazmat loads so fast without cutting corners." I felt pieces clicking into place. Colin wasn't just falsifying maintenance records to save money. He was using forged safety documents to justify aggressive delivery schedules that legitimate operators couldn't match. He's using fake inspections to bid on contracts? Makes sense. Tell a client you can deliver Class 8 chemicals in half the normal time. They'll pay premium rates. Just need paperwork showing your fleet can handle the pace. Frank pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Department of Transportation, Office of Inspector General. Woman named Patricia Henley. I worked with her on a case about 5 years ago. She's thorough, she's fair, and she doesn't mess around with safety violations. I pocketed the card. If I do this, there's no going back. Wesley, you've got 23 years of clean driving. Don't let some desk jockey with a spreadsheet ruin that. I drove home thinking about what Frank had said. Colin wasn't just cutting corners. He was running a con game, using falsified safety records to win contracts that put legitimate operators out of business. And when something inevitably went wrong, the drivers would be left holding the bag. That night I called Patricia Henley. "Inspector General's office, this is Patricia. My name is Wesley Hart. I'm a hazmat driver and I need to report systematic safety violations at my company." "What kind of violations?" "Falsified inspection records, forged maintenance documents, and fraudulent compliance certifications for Department of Transportation regulated cargo." There was a pause. "Mr. Hart, I'm going to need you to come in and make a formal statement." "How soon can you be in Helena?" "Tomorrow morning." "I'll be waiting." Patricia Henley's office was exactly what I expected from a federal investigator. Sparse, organized, and focused. She was a compact woman in her 50s with gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that made you want to tell the truth whether you planned to or not. "Mr. Hart, before we begin, I want you to understand that filing a whistleblower complaint is a serious matter. Are you prepared for the consequences?" "What kind of consequences?" "For you? Legal protection, possible relocation assistance if there's retaliation, and potentially a percentage of any fines recovered. For your former employer, federal investigation, possible criminal charges, and likely business closure if the violations are as extensive as you've described." I thought about Colin's fake maintenance logs, the forged inspection reports, and the drivers who didn't know they were signing their names to federal crimes. "I'm prepared." Patricia activated a digital recorder and opened a thick file folder. "Tell me everything." For 2 hours I walked her through Colin's operation. The systematic falsification of inspection records, the maintenance requests that disappeared into his desk drawer, the pressure on drivers to sign documents they hadn't prepared, the aggressive delivery schedules that were only possible by skipping required safety procedures. Patricia took notes, asked specific questions, and requested copies of all the photographic evidence I'd collected. "This is substantial," she said when I finished. "But I need more than just your testimony. Would you be willing to wear a recording device?" "You want me to go back?" "I want you to apply for your old job." Colin Reddick called our office yesterday, claiming a disgruntled former employee was spreading false accusations about Trail Point's safety record. I felt my jaw tighten. He's already trying to discredit me. Which means he's worried. Worried people make mistakes, and mistakes create evidence. Patricia opened another folder and showed me a photograph of a truck accident in Colorado. A tanker carrying industrial chemicals had jackknifed on Interstate 25, spilling corrosive materials across 3 lanes of highway. This happened 2 weeks ago. Driver walked away, but the cleanup cost exceeded $2 million. The truck was operated by Mountain View Transport, which used to compete with Trail Point for regional hazmat contracts. Used to? Trail Point underbid them by 30% on every major contract this year. Mountain View went out of business last month. I understood. Colin wasn't just endangering his own drivers, He was destroying legitimate competitors by bidding contracts at prices that were only possible through fraud. What do you need me to do? Patricia pulled out a small device about the size of a shirt button. Apply for your job back. Let Colin think he's won. Document everything he says about maintenance procedures, inspection protocols, and delivery schedules. We particularly need him to admit knowledge of the falsified records. How long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Long enough to establish a pattern of systematic violations. I clipped the recording device inside my jacket pocket and thought about Angela's face when I told her I was going back to work for Colin. There's one more thing, Patricia said. We believe TrailPoint is operating similar schemes in 3 other states. If we can build a solid case here, it might prevent accidents elsewhere. That decided it. I wasn't just protecting myself or even my fellow drivers at TrailPoint. There were people in Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah who didn't know they were sharing highways with trucks that hadn't been properly maintained. When do I start? Tomorrow. Call Colin, tell him you've thought it over and you're ready to be a team player. I left Patricia's office with recording equipment, a direct phone number, and the knowledge that I was about to become a federal informant. Colin thought he'd won when I walked out of his office. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The Department of Transportation arrived at TrailPoint on a Thursday morning in December. 4 agents, 2 inspectors, and Patricia Henley herself, rolling through the gate in unmarked vehicles while Colin was reviewing delivery schedules in his office. I was in the break room when the commotion started. Drivers gathering at windows pointing at official vehicles, asking questions nobody could answer. Colin came out of his office looking confused, then concerned, then scared as Patricia approached with a badge and a warrant. Colin Reddick? I'm Inspector Patricia Henley, Department of Transportation Office of Inspector General. We're conducting a compliance audit of your hazmat operations. Colin's face went pale. I wasn't notified of any scheduled inspection. This isn't a scheduled inspection, Mr. Reddick. This is a federal investigation into systematic safety violations and document fraud. The agents spread out across the facility like they'd done this before. One team went straight to the maintenance bay, another to Colin's office, and a third began inspecting every truck in the yard. Patricia stayed with Colin, who kept looking around like he was hoping someone would rescue him. Within an hour, 3 trucks were tagged as out of service for safety violations. The lead inspector found the same hydraulic leaks, brake problems, and air system failures I documented weeks earlier, all covered by inspection reports claiming the trucks were in perfect condition. Colin tried to explain. Those inspections were conducted by qualified personnel according to federal standards. Patricia held up a clipboard with his signature. According to this document, you personally inspected truck number 247 on November 15th. Is that accurate? Yes. Truck 247 has brake pads worn down to metal backing plates. The wear pattern indicates they've been in this condition for at least 6 weeks. Did you observe this condition during your inspection? Colin's voice cracked. There might have been some oversight in the documentation process. Oversight. I see. Patricia opened another folder and pulled out printed transcripts of our recorded conversations. Every admission, every instruction to falsify records, every time Colin had pressured me to ignore safety violations. Mr. Reddick, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of federal documents, and willful violation of hazardous materials transportation regulations. TrailPoint's hazmat license was suspended that afternoon. Their insurance company canceled coverage the next morning. By the end of the week, all operations had ceased and the facility was locked pending resolution of federal charges. Colin hired a lawyer who negotiated a plea agreement. 2 years federal prison, lifetime ban from transportation industry employment, and personal liability for cleanup costs from any accidents linked to his falsified records. Most of the drivers found work elsewhere within a month. The younger ones learned a lesson about the importance of safety protocols. The veterans like Danny Flores and Kevin Walsh were grateful someone had finally exposed what they'd suspected all along. As for me, Red Mesa Freight contacted me the day after Trail Point closed. They'd heard about the investigation and were impressed that a driver had risked his career to protect public safety. "We need someone to run our hazmat division," the owner said during our phone conversation. "Someone who understands that doing things right is more important than doing them fast." The pay was better than Trail Point. The equipment was newer, and most importantly, they wanted me to train younger drivers in proper safety procedures. I accepted on one condition: all maintenance would be performed by certified mechanics, all inspections would be documented with photographs, and any driver who felt unsafe would have my direct phone number. 3 months later, I was back on the road with a new company, a clean conscience and the knowledge that sometimes doing the right thing takes time to pay off. But when it does, it pays off completely. I never saw Colin again, but I heard he got a job selling insurance after his release. Somehow that seemed fitting.